By the way, you see Trump give the State of the Union last night? Is he still talking? I don't know. But folks, it's unbelievable. The guy talks for almost 2 hours, but never mentions the anniversary of Putin invading Ukraine. Never once. He doesn't offer a word of support, even recognition to Epstein's victims sitting in front of him during the entire time. He never acknowledged them. They're around the world. Despite everything you read, despite the fact that COVID drove migration to record levels all around the world, the day I left office, border crossing into the United States were lower than the day that I entered that office inherited from Trump. He is, I won't say it. That's just a fact. On the day I left office, I handed Trump the strongest economy in the world. In the world. That's not hyperbole. That's a fact.
Nobody saw this coming. While the political world was still processing Trump's State of the Union address and debating what it meant, Joe Biden walked into a room in South Carolina and delivered the most direct, pointed, factually grounded takedown of Donald Trump that anyone has delivered since the election. No teleprompter energy, no careful hedging, no poll-tested language designed to appeal to every demographic simultaneously. Just a former president who knows exactly what he handed over on January 20th, standing in the state where his political comeback began, saying out loud what 60% of Americans are already thinking, but nobody in the political establishment has been willing to say with this much force and this much specificity. And the contrast between what Biden said in South Carolina and what Trump was saying simultaneously in Corpus Christi told you everything you need to know about where these two men actually are right now. Make sure you're subscribed to The John Brown Show, because what I am about to walk you through is not a nostalgic look backward at a former presidency. It is a factual accounting of what was built, what was handed over, and what has been done to it in the 13 months since. And the numbers Biden used are not talking points. They are documented economic data that the current administration cannot refute because it is sitting in the federal records. Here is where Biden started. He watched the State of the Union, the 1 hour and 42-minute address where Trump mentioned the stock market 3 times, claimed tariffs were the primary driver of the greatest economic turnaround in history, and told America that affordability has essentially been solved. Biden's response to all of that was direct, and it was funny, and it landed because the people in that room in South Carolina knew exactly what he was describing. What's wrong with this guy? Is he still talking? Share this video because that single question captured what millions of Americans were thinking while sitting through an address that Fox News analysts themselves called a losing proposition on the signature policy being touted from the podium. But Biden did not stop at mockery. He went straight to the specific number that exposes the central lie of Trump's economic narrative more completely than any speech or analysis can. Job creation. The most basic measurable indicator of whether an economy is actually working for the people living inside it. In Biden's final year in office, the American economy created 2.2 million jobs, 2.2 million in a single year. In Trump's first year back, the total job creation was 185,000. That is not a rounding error. That is not a statistical artifact that can be explained away with methodology disputes. That is a gap of more than 2 million jobs between what the economy Biden handed over was producing and what the economy Trump inherited and immediately began disrupting through tariff chaos is producing. Think about what those numbers mean when placed next to Trump's State of the Union claim that the economic turnaround has been the biggest in history. The actual job creation data says that the economy Trump inherited was running at more than 10 times the job creation pace his first year has produced. That is not a turnaround. That is a slowdown. And the man who handed over an economy running at 2.2 million jobs per year is now in South Carolina, pointing at the receipts. Make sure you're subscribed, because what Biden said about the Epstein survivors sitting in the chamber during Trump's address is the part of this speech that the mainstream political media is going to struggle to ignore no matter how hard they try. During the State of the Union, Democratic members brought Epstein survivors as their guests. Those survivors sat in the chamber wearing teal scarves representing sexual assault awareness and butterfly pins honoring a victim who took her own life. They sat there for 1 hour and 42 minutes, and the President of the United States, who has publicly claimed he barely knew Jeffrey Epstein, did not offer a single word of support or recognition to the survivors sitting in front of him. Not one word, not an acknowledgement, not a gesture. 1 hour and 42 minutes, and the Epstein survivors who came to that chamber hoping for some signal that the most powerful office in the country saw their suffering received nothing. Biden named that silence in South Carolina. He called it out directly. And the people in that room understood exactly what the silence meant and why a former president standing in South Carolina felt the obligation to say what the current president refused to say in the chamber where those survivors were sitting. Share this video because Biden's border numbers put to rest one of the central factual claims of the Trump political operation. Biden said that on the day he left office, border crossings into the United States were lower than the day he entered office. Lower, after inheriting the chaotic final period of Trump's first-term immigration policy, after navigating a global migration surge that affected every country in the world as COVID disruptions normalized. After 4 years of Republican obstruction of the comprehensive border legislation that would have provided the funding and legal framework for the reforms both parties claim to want. Border crossings were lower on the day Biden left than the day he arrived. That is a fact sitting in the federal data. And the administration that spent 4 years claiming the border was in catastrophic crisis, that used immigration enforcement as its central political identity, that deployed the Insurrection Act and militarized enforcement operations and dismantled refugee programs, inherited a border situation that was already improving from the president it spent 4 years calling a disaster on that specific issue. Think about what it means that the man who actually built and handed over an improving border situation is now speaking in South Carolina, while the current administration is detaining people with no criminal records, locking up leukemia patients, and dismissing DOJ attorneys faster than it can replace them with people who know how to file motions in immigration court. Make sure you're subscribed because Biden's healthcare assessment connected the dots between Trump's Obamacare obsession, the measles resurgence, and the rising costs that Americans are experiencing in ways that the current administration's communications operation cannot factually dispute. Measles, a disease that had been essentially eradicated in the United States through decades of vaccination campaigns and public health infrastructure. Coming back. Not because of some novel pathogen that science had not yet figured out how to address, because vaccination rates are declining, because the public health communications apparatus has been captured by people who are hostile to the scientific consensus on vaccines, because the commitment to preventative medicine that brought measles to the edge of elimination is being systematically undermined from the top of the government. Biden called it out as a healthcare cost issue as much as a public health issue. Trump is jacking up healthcare costs for millions of Americans because of his obsession with destroying anything associated with Barack Obama. A policy choice driven not by any economic analysis or healthcare outcome data, but by the personal psychological need to erase the legacy of his predecessor. Obamacare extended coverage to millions of Americans. The Trump administration is still trying to destroy it, and the cost of that attempt is showing up in the insurance premiums and healthcare bills of the people who were supposed to be the beneficiaries of the greatest economic turnaround in history. Share this video because what was happening simultaneously in Corpus Christi, while Biden was delivering that assessment in South Carolina, is the most revealing contrast in recent American political history. Trump was speaking at an event in Texas, and the substance of his remarks included a lengthy story about a fat friend who takes fat drugs and pays different prices in different countries, a story whose connection to any coherent policy agenda remains unclear, and a story about a tough policeman whose marriage improved because his 401k went up and his wife stopped thinking he was a financial loser. That is the contrast. Biden in South Carolina with documented job creation numbers, border crossing data, healthcare cost analysis, and a direct reckoning with what has been built and what has been dismantled. Trump in Corpus Christi with stories about fat rich friends and policemen whose marriages improved because of stock market performance that has since reversed. Think about what the Truth Social SEC filing released the same day adds to this picture. Trump Media and Technology Group, the parent company of Truth Social, reported losing $712 million in 2025 while bringing in $3.7 million in revenue. $712 million in losses, $3.7 million in revenue. The company is now planning to spin off the social media platform and merge with a fusion energy company that has received substantial government contracts from the Department of Energy since 2019. Follow that sequence. A social media company losing $700 million annually merges with an energy company that gets its revenue from federal government contracts. The president's personal financial vehicle becomes a company whose income depends on contracts awarded by an agency run by his own cabinet secretary. An administration that claims to be fighting corruption and draining swamps is engineering a merger between the president's money-losing social media platform and a federally funded energy contractor. Make sure you're subscribed, because what Biden said about dark days and democracy being an act rather than a state captures the actual stakes of the moment we are in more directly than anything else said at any political event this week. He did not sugarcoat it. These are dark days. The threats are being amplified in ways that have not been seen before. Our future is literally on the line. Our children are watching, and the battle for the soul of this nation never fully ends. It requires continuous active participation from people who understand what is at stake. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. John Lewis said that. A man who spent his life being beaten for insisting on his right to participate in American democracy said that the preservation of that democracy is not something that happens passively. It requires action. It requires showing up. It requires voting in numbers large enough that the barriers being erected against it cannot contain the outcome. Biden said Trump knows that. He said that is why Trump is trying to put up every barrier he can. Because a president with 60% disapproval and 47 points underwater with independents knows exactly what happens in elections when the people who are dissatisfied show up in the numbers. The early voting data in Texas is already suggesting they intend to show up. Share this video, because the specific comparison Biden drew on Ukraine is the one that will echo longest in the international community that is already watching American reliability calculations with alarm. Trump delivered a 1 hour and 42-minute State of the Union address. He did not mention the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Not once. A war that began when Russia crossed an international border to invade a sovereign democratic nation. A war that American foreign policy had been built around supporting since the invasion. A war where American credibility and the entire post-World War II architecture of international norms is on the line. Trump talked about his fat friend. He did not say the word Ukraine. Biden noticed. Biden named it in South Carolina. And the allies in Europe and the democratic nations watching whether American leadership can be relied upon noticed that the former president had to travel to South Carolina to say what the current president would not say from the most prominent podium in the world. These are dark days. That is not spin. That is a former president who spent 50 years in public service, who has known more heads of state than anyone in American political history by his own reckoning, looking at what is happening to the institutions and alliances and economic foundations he spent a career building and saying, with the bluntness that comes from having nothing left to lose politically, that what is being done to this country is wrong. The numbers prove it, and the path back runs through the ballot box. The contrast has been drawn. The receipts have been presented. South Carolina heard it. This story is just getting started. Stay tuned.